I will now present the policy briefs that have been developed under the TANDEM project. These were officially submitted to the Commission last week and are available for download on the website alongside with all the other deliverables. So the development of the different policy briefs is based on the feedback from the technical work that was conducted under the project. We looked at all the different work packages and the outputs from those work packages in order to identify those areas where we believe some policy recommendations would be worthwhile. Okay, there we go. So in this respect, we identified 4 areas for the different policy briefs. First one focusing on financing and economics, the second on stakeholder engagement and public acceptance, a third on the regulatory framework, and finally the fourth one dedicated to skills. The format of each of the policy briefs is the same. If you go to the deliverable, we've really tried to aim for a kind of one-pager or a two-pager in some cases with the same format, with very clear messaging that is put forward to the policymakers. In summary, each paper basically gives a short summary of what the issue is, what are the challenges that the project has identified, and what are the policymakers that we have put forward. In terms of the target audience, again, as the title would suggest, it really is for policymakers, but policymakers at all levels. So not just at EU level, but also at national and local level. Coming now to the first of these policy briefs. So this one is the one related to finance and economics. And here you can see some of the challenges which were identified in this respect. So first of all, there's the competition. So the competition with other technologies, energy imports, and then electricity and hydrogen production. So really that area of revenue maximization. So where are you going to get the most? Is it going to be in electricity production, or is it going to be on hydrogen production? Another challenge that's been identified from a finance and economic perspective is the fact that the unit size varies. So what is really important on all of this in terms of working on the finance and economic side is really ensuring that the SMRs meet the needs of the market that they are hoping to address. And how can you do that? For those SMRs that would be there to provide district heating, the challenge identified is the fact that the networks are often very small and not well interconnected. Currently, in several member states, there's no legal framework which would enable the sale and use of nuclear heat. So a lot of the focus is on really, and the legislation is linked to electricity, but does not cover the heat that is produced by nuclear reactors, and which is one of the primary benefits which SMRs could bring. Taxation. Taxation would need to be adapted in order to take into account the nominal power output of the SMRs. And then there's the transportation aspects, which can have a big impact on the economics of a project. So the transportation of heat and the transportation of hydrogen over a long distance is very challenging and can be extremely costly. In order to invest in such projects, you need to be able to demonstrate that you have demand for what you're going to be producing. That's one of the key things that investors want to see. Do you have an off-taker? And at the moment, this is an area that is currently lacking. So there is a need to stimulate demand. And then, of course, public acceptance. Of course, public acceptance can block projects. And the more projects are blocked, the more costly it can be to construct those projects because they take longer to build. So what are the policy recommendations that have been identified? Well, you can see here the summary. We have 3 key recommendations. First of all, we need to clarify the status of nuclear heat by integrating it within the projected low carbon energy share together with renewables and heat recovery for district heating. Because at the moment, the situation varies across Europe. Another key point, and which is actually very relevant at the moment, relates to the Low Carbon Hydrogen Delegated Act. And this needs to be clear and, more importantly, technology neutral. As such, the Low Carbon Hydrogen Delegated Act will need to recognise hydrogen produced from nuclear alongside renewables. So it's coming to this point of equal treatment. And this is something which we have been working on significantly for the last few months. And then finally, there needs to be promotion of the use of indicators other than levelized cost of. So when you're looking in terms of accounting the cost of a project, you need to take into account other aspects such as CO2 intensity, reliability, resilience, and sovereignty. So these are other factors that need to be taken into the levelized cost of. Coming now to stakeholder engagement. I think one of the first things is that SMRs are a new concept and therefore they're quite difficult to define. In addition, there's currently no SMR in existence in the EU, which means there's a lack of a common narrative and a common language, and it's not easy for people to visualize something that currently does not exist. Current attitudes. So yes, we have seen public acceptance for nuclear grow significantly in different member states. But at the same time, there are still some concerns about nuclear. And of course, these concerns could affect opinion towards SMRs. And this is particularly important with regards to the next bullet point, which relates to location. A lot of these SMRs are likely to be located closer to citizens, particularly those that are going to be built for district heating purposes or those built near industrial clusters. And so this means this brings additional challenges in terms of getting their buy-in on projects. Also because we're going to be going to new locations and to people who may not be used to nuclear. As with all nuclear projects, as with any project, in fact, there's always a variety of stakeholders that we need to engage with. These stakeholders often have different needs, different cultures, and also different languages. So when we're conducting the stakeholder engagement, one size most certainly does not fit all. And then finally, and this is going to be relevant for those projects in particular that are looking to supply district heating to cities, very often in cities, decision making is quite fragmented. What are the recommendations that we've put forward? As you'll see, a lot of these recommendations are as standard. These apply to any nuclear project, be it large, small, or advanced. First key point, continuous and transparent dialogue. It's going to be important that policymakers, as well as industry, engage with the communities in which these SMRs are going to be located. And as part of that, policymakers also need to be involved in the development of tools and channels for engagement. Yes, the industry needs to do a lot on the communication side, but so do policymakers if they really believe in the value of having an SMR in their community. The knowledge of citizens needs to be enhanced, again, particularly for new communities that are not used to nuclear, or if you're going to be building it next to a city, but also for other policymakers. So amongst themselves, policymakers need to engage and provide the information and the knowledge sharing. Diverse groups will need to be brought into the conversation. We often face a challenge with women, for example. Mechanisms need to be put in place to ensure that they can join that conversation around a potential new project, as well as migrant communities, which can often be difficult to reach out to. And here again, it's not just about industry doing the outreach, it's also about policymakers working with us to reach these different groups. When it comes to the specific project, the what's in it for me question needs to be answered. And here again, policymakers can play an important role in this respect. If a policymaker really sees the benefits that a project is going to bring to that community in terms of economic contribution, in terms of job creation, then they should also be the ones communicating this message to the local stakeholders. They also should be the ones explaining the process. It's good, industry has to explain it, but they also have to have policymakers providing the same information. Policymakers also need to be involved in emergency planning. And they should also be facilitating the involvement of independent experts and enable stakeholder engagement. So they should be providing the meeting rooms to enable meetings. They should be supporting the transport, the travel for these independent experts. Because again, it's not just about industry communicating the message. We also need external stakeholders to be there to answer questions, to be seen as a more neutral party. Coming now to the next point, which relates to the regulatory framework. Here again, location is one of the key challenges. The plan is to have SMRs located close to industrial clusters, but this also means having an understanding of how the regulatory framework of those other industries works. The same applies to populated areas. If you're looking to build it next to a city, then the regulatory framework will need to be adapted to take that into consideration. This then links to the next point about safety. So the potential update of requirements will be needed in order to include impacts from surrounding sites. So it's not just about what the safety of the SMR, but it's also about the other sites, particularly in industrial clusters, that are located adjacent to that SMR. What could the potential impact of an incident on one of those sites be for the nuclear project? The policy recommendations here, first of all, the regulators. They need to have sufficient resources to ensure early involvement. And this is where policymakers really need to make sure that they have the workforce that they need in order to assess all these new projects, which are gradually going to start appearing across Europe. They should also be supporting a collaborative framework, so ensuring that engagement between the nuclear regulators and the non-nuclear regulators, so the regulators that work with those other industries. Downstream users, policymakers can also help enable the early involvement of the off-takers, potentially even at the pre-licensing stage. Communication, they can support nuclear safety regulators by providing clear and understandable information to the public. So this links to the stakeholder engagement point previously. The regulators as well will need to communicate some information, and that will need to be done in an understandable way. And finally, on the licensing framework, policymakers need to ensure that it is updated to incorporate the cogeneration opportunities. Coming now to skills and what are the challenges? And in a way, this kind of relates to the fact that we don't currently have any SMRs in operation today. But first of all, we need to identify the gaps, and that is going to be an ongoing process. Some SMRs are new technologies, and they are going to require new approaches. SMRs based on existing technology, so we may know the technology, but what we will need to focus on from an education and skills perspective is the role that they're going to play, because they are going to be playing a different role than the current standard large reactors, because they will be operating within this hybrid energy system. And that is probably going to require additional knowledge of how the hybrid energy systems work. Research. This is in part related to the fact, as I said, that there are currently no SMRs in operation today, but gradually more information is going to have to be gathered in order to preempt future skills needs. The curricula, they will need to be updated to incorporate the new approach and the hybridization aspects. But again, one of the challenges is going to be time. Updating education and training resources is not going to happen overnight, and it will be a gradual process that will evolve as more information becomes available on what the gaps and the needs are. So what are the policy recommendations from the skills side? First of all, policymakers need to facilitate the rapid deployment of relevant education and training courses within the curricula of higher education institutions. They need to facilitate the connection between soft skill and hard skill providers and the interaction between the different institutions. And finally, policymakers need to facilitate cooperation between academia, research, and industry. This is going to help create the viable programs that will ensure the development of a skilled workforce. And what is going to be really important here is avoiding the tendency we currently have of working in silos. It's not about academia or industry or research. It's really about bringing everybody together to work on this. And that is the end of my presentation. We do have a couple of minutes if you have any questions on these policy briefs. Yes, please.
So, hello, I'm a policy makers from the Belgian government. And so thank you for the overview you provided here, but I have a not so small question. So we talk about the integration of SMRs closer to citizens and inside cities, which means multiplicating the number of nuclear sites. And while safety might not be a concern due to the safety, the passive safety features of SMRs, what is more of a concern, at least for me, is the security aspects. So I don't know if you've been following the Belgian actuality in the news, but right now we have deployed the army to secure our nuclear sites, and I don't think it will be well considered to deploy the army at various sites in the city. So does the question of security has been considered in the discussions or not?
I look here to the work package who was dealing with safety aspects, but I don't believe that at the moment that has been taken into account. My assumption is that it would in any case come from the regulator's side. I'm sort of looking around. There's no one there. Claire?
Regarding safety in details, I would say for TANDEM, we provided more technical recommendations than really a policy brief. We provided some policy brief linked to the regulatory aspect. It is what Jessica showed just before, but not in further detail.
It is true that the world has changed, particularly over the last couple of years. From our side, maybe, so I'm from Nuclear Europe, it's probably a more broader conversation about how to secure our energy sites in general. So, yeah, as you've probably seen, yes, obviously there's the issue of nuclear facilities, but then you have also grid infrastructure, which can be taken down, hydropower, can be taken down. So there's a lot of, it's probably a more coordinated conversation that would need to be had in terms of securing our different energy infrastructure sites.
If I may just a comment, we know that other European projects are also providing policy brief. We are in contact, for instance, with Gemini, with NPICO. Gemini is dedicated to the analysis of power generation with high temperature reactor, HTRs. In particular with the link with hydrogen production. NPICO is a project dedicated to the production of hydrogen with existing PWR, VVER, for instance. And we would like to provide joint policy briefs or at least joint configurations. So we have some discussion about this point because we think that together we are stronger, but we are not sure to go to the end, but at least we are thinking about providing this kind of insight.
Yes, just a remark. The name of the game is, I think, together. We have to do it together with other parties. And one of the other parties is, of course, the safety agency, the safety regulator. We have to, where is the safety regulator in the room here? Is there one?
I don't think she's all right.
I think it will be very important for the future to have these guys with us in this kind of discussion. And is the same remark for the defense or the protection of the site, because they're part of the game, and you have to bring together. And once again, together is the key word of today.
Just to say, they are on board in the project, but I'm not. I think she hasn't arrived yet. In fact.
Yes, a representative from ASNR, the French. Yeah, for sure. No. At least for our yes, but for sure. But at least for our projects, yes, we have on board some institutes linked to safety, GRS, who is here. VTT, also Ineris, Frank Pratt, who is here also, not directly in the project. We cannot have everybody on board. It's a pity.
But there will be a presentation this afternoon, I believe.
Yes, dedicated to safety, for sure.
Just a small comment on the security aspect. Actually, this is more related to the design of the reactors, right? I mean, then there is a huge, let's say, commitment to include not only safety, but also security and safeguard when you do design, so the safeguard security and safety by design. And actually, I mean, the military, it's really not needed for a nuclear site. So we have in some places, in some research reactor, we do not have military on the site. So it's really a matter of finding the balance. But I can, I can see your point on the security. That is something that probably we need. This is something, let's say, beyond the purpose of the TANDEM project, involve the concept of the SMR itself. Then regarding to the topic, on slide 5, you mentioned on the third point we should overcome the concept of levelized cost of blah, blah, blah. And I fully agree on that. But probably on the top of that, we also need to find a way to clearly showing to the public, to the citizen, and also to the industry, which is the real cost of the electricity from their side, not from the producer's side. Is there any, let's say, recommendation that you can we can provide to the policymakers on that?
But I think that's partly where we have, where we've mentioned in there that we need to basically explain that it's not just about the cost of producing the electricity, it's about the grid connection costs, it's about the cost of CO2. So if you're using energy sources with a higher CO2 content, the price of that CO2 is also an important one. And then also the reliability aspects. It's about the remuneration as well for providing stability to the grid. And that was sort of mentioned in there. So all those aspects, that's what we propose including in that kind of the calculation on the cost of the technologies to really be able to demonstrate that it is as cost efficient as other low carbon energy sources. But there will be a more detailed presentation this afternoon on the techno-economic analysis from Stephanie, who is there, I see in the back. So I don't know if you want to answer that question now or will we tackle it this afternoon?
Yes, I can try to answer. It's true that we only consider the various costs of electricity so far in the project, but we could have also considered value-added levelized cost of electricity. But it's not so easy to calculate because, like, for example, for renewable energies, you know that if we have a lot of renewable energies in the energy grid, for example in France, we will have to add some storages and so on. And this indicator account for this kind of additional investment that are needed if we have a huge development of technology. So yeah, this is the perspective of our work. We could have used other indicators than levelized cost of electricity. But I will, yes, present this this afternoon.
Thank you, Stephanie.